Even If It Kills Me is presented by Manhead Merch.
How many times have you washed your hair with a stranger's shampoo? That's a fucking bizarre question, right? I can pause here for a second if you'd like, let you think about it. Using a complete stranger's shampoo is usually something that comes with an amazing story of a wild night of partying and, blacking out and waking up in a strange place. In our case, however, we were doing this out of necessity, out of thriftiness. Being on tour requires a tremendous amount of endurance. And not the I ran long distance track in high school endurance. It's way different. It requires a very particular set of skills entirely. There's a thriftiness that emerges in your day-to-day. Simply put, you are constantly learning how to tour. Such as using a stranger's shampoo instead of dealing with having your own. And this was something we learned pretty early on. The next thing we had to figure out was how to do this job while being, exhausted and flat broke and sore from sleeping on floors and constantly hungover on a regular basis. And somehow that was actually the easy part. I don't remember my reaction to hearing the phrase, "We need to find a place to stay," for the first time. I never really put too much thought into the details of a day on tour back then. I was 22 when it all started. I wasn't thinking about much, especially when it came to details. I didn't expect the amount of effort it would take each night just to look for a place to stay. You're probably wondering at this point, how does one go about asking complete strangers if you could stay at their house? The answer is really simple. You make a sign and you tape it to the merch table. Every night.
Or even in some cases, announce it from the stage, which I think we did a couple times as well. And say, we're deplorable scum that is got nowhere to stay tonight. And if you would be so kind, we will sleep on your couches or your childhood beds or wherever you will let us.
But it worked. It worked. That's how we met a lot of our, a lot of people were fans. And, if they had their own place, no matter how small it was or how many cats were in it or how infrequently they cleaned it, there was always somebody who would offer to let us stay.
Asking people that came to the show for a place to stay wasn't actually that out of the ordinary for bands that were just starting out. It's also worth remembering, we were a band. A band that some people actually came to see perform. We weren't just 5 random dudes at a concert walking up to people like we were in some fucking Jack Kerouac novel. "Hey man, dig it man, my own lady doesn't mess with you jazz cats, but I can dig it, you can stay."
A, are you going to get anybody to say, yeah, you can come stay with me? But then B, trying to do the quick and dirty evaluation of them to see, is this going to be really weird or really awesome?
Man, oh man, it was a crapshoot of what you got, but it was where all of our stories came from. That is like the material that you talk about with people from other bands. It's not anything else,
Some nights I would honestly want it to get crazy, bar hopping, eating shitty deep fried foods like a drunken madman. I was living. Most of the time though, I just wanted to find a soft, quiet place to sleep. However, most of the time, it got crazy. Bar hopping, eating shitty deep fried foods like a drunken madman.
It was like an endurance thing between someone who has to do it 7 days a week and someone that's doing it, like for either the first time of the week or maybe the first time of the month, and they've charged all up for it.
When people invite a band to stay at their house, they fully expect you to at least party with them for a little bit.
You already got to the club at 4, let's say, and then when you get there, there's a whole bunch of beers, maybe a bottle of Jack Daniels if the rider's filled, and this idiotic assumption that we all had that was like, oh man, I gotta get drunk if I'm gonna perform, I'm not gonna be able to do my job without doing this. And so you've already been hitting the sauce pretty heavy before you go on. You know, you get done with your show, and to be honest, that's always like the high point. You get done and you're like, man, great show, guys, awesome, cool. And then it's really always almost all downhill from there.
All right, so doing the math, that would mean that at this point in the night, we've all been drinking off and on for, I don't know, roughly 5 hours or so. John, Ryan, Mac, and Pete have all physically exerted themselves live on stage for everyone or no one to see for roughly 35 minutes. And the night was quite literally just beginning.
It does get a little bit exhausting, and then your mind starts to wander to being like, oh, God, then after all this, we got to like load out. Throw everything in the trailer. Maybe that person you're staying with is like at a bar already that you have to go to. Maybe that person that you're staying with is already at home calling all their friends and being like, the band's coming over, let's rage. And so no matter what it is, they've set it up to be a horrible experience, even when they're trying to be nice to you.
They want their stories to talk about, right? So they want you to get drunk with them and make them feel like they're hanging out with a band and with rock stars, which you'll do happily. It's the trade-off. It's the the currency that you're trading between people, right? You're like, you can get fucked up with us tonight if you don't touch me while I'm sleeping, and I can sleep in the corner of your hairy apartment.
Anyone want to house 10 belligerently drunk people overnight with zero compensation?
We just put up a sign. And here's a t-shirt if you can have us stay. We need a place to stay. This is for you.
The days on the road and the nights spent in clubs and in strangers' homes all blur together really quick. It all becomes one party you can't leave, so you have to find ways to endure and enjoy it. And, as it turns out, not everyone develops that endurance. And eventually, it's all pow, right in the kisser. And the first one to get knocked out was Pete.
I was way too in my own head about how I was handling touring life or not handling it. I was letting myself spiral about what we were doing, how we were doing it, where we were going. Every little thing was triggering me.
I don't think things ever negatively got out of hand. I think things got loud and we were having fun and maybe weren't being as respectful of seeing that our friend needed us to chill the fuck out and quiet down maybe for a second.
We always had this thought of like, why is he being such a buzzkill all the time? Like, why doesn't he want to like hang out and like party and do all this stuff? Like, and his mind would have been like, why aren't these guys like, focused more, I guess, on getting shows and doing whatever to get the band somewhere.
There was a couple nights like in the van where I'm just like, it's taking like all of my energy just to not break.
Time stops moving before you break. Everything leading up to it feels infinite. Your inner self is so lost, so far from the surface of the present moment that your bones and your muscles are the only things keeping you upright. The hollow self shatters and what little of you remains goes Super Saiyan. Everything changes. Not for better or for worse. Those words, ideas do not apply in these moments. Change like this just is.
We played a show in Philly, and then we stayed with my cousin, and I had a fucking mental breakdown.
We woke up at his cousin's house, and Pete sat up and said, guys, something's wrong. And he was crying. And that was kind of where we were all like, oh shit.
I guess it wasn't really a big shock. It was pretty well known that, there was some tours where, Pete didn't necessarily want to be on the road. I don't think it was that he didn't want to be there, but a lot of times he wasn't comfortable being out there. And we could all see that and feel that.
To me, it always came off as anger, and that was easier for me to deal with because then I could be like, fuck that guy. If he just wants to be like, the pissed off dude, he can be the pissed off dude. And then I'm sure it's easier for me to dismiss why he is being the way he is, right?
I know it was evident to the guys, but none of us were really equipped to handle that kind of stuff at the time. It's such a stupid thing to think about now, but I had this feeling like I can't let this control me because if it does, then it's over. I was in such terrible shape mentally. I ended up nuking it myself.
Pete's back was against a wall, and at this point, he knew what he had to do.
I told the guys that I couldn't keep touring, I had to go home.
When he did decide that he wasn't going to continue on with us from there, I don't think it was so much a surprise or shock that he wasn't going to go, but more now what do we do?
With no real way to get back home, Pete had no choice but to call his parents. With no real way to find a replacement drummer, only a few hours before showtime, Pete had no choice but to go to work one more time.
We had a show that night, and cancellations are bad. You just don't want to be the band that cancels. It's a thing that follows you. So we definitely forced him to play that show, which I think he probably actually had a good time doing because I want to say that venue was fun. And it had good sound and good stage sound, and they had good catering. So it was probably a good one for him to go on by the end of the night. But it was we played the show, and his parents were waiting outside. He got in the van and he drove away, and we're kind of standing there.
We took my drums and shit out of the van and the trailer, put it in my parents' car, and then I proceeded to drive all night home. I went home and I just went into a cocoon. I locked myself up and I dealt with it.
For the second time now, the band found themselves Pete-less, drummerless.
I felt like I was letting them down, and I didn't want to do that, but I also knew that I could not maintain the rest of that tour because, it would have destroyed everything. It would have destroyed the band. It would have destroyed our friendships. It would have done everything. So I had to just jump.
Ever been overwhelmed by the logistics of merch on tour? I remember a chaotic night trying to keep everything organized while the crowd was surrounding the merch table. As I scrambled to find the right size t-shirts for everyone, I realized we were completely sold out of all of our most popular shirts. Okay, now imagine you're managing merch for an arena show. How do you make that leap? Manhead Merch is the powerhouse behind some of the biggest names in the industry. They offer a full suite of services: touring, e-commerce, retail, and licensing, tailored for top-tier talent. They take care of everything, from design and manufacturing to seamless order fulfillment, ensuring your merch game is as polished as your performance. Manhead Merch transforms chaos into streamlined success. They manage every aspect of merchandising so you don't have to. If I would have had Manhead Merch back then, they would have handled the logistics, and I could have handled that crowd. Ready to take your band's merch to the next level? Visit manheadmerch.com.
I don't remember ever thinking Pete was out of the band. He had left that tour, but he just was going home, and he needed to go home for a little bit, and so he did.
Then that's when we were like, Pete's gone, let's party! And then we lost the cash box and all hell broke loose.
The first night I was gone, they forgot the cash box at the venue.
For one night, it was the three of us, and that's why we kind of went off the handle, right? It was like the kids were out to play since the adults were away.
Have you ever seen a silverback gorilla seeing its own reflection for the first time? It's kind of amazing. They don't really know what to do. They charge it at first, and kind of back off a little bit, and then apprehensively, they just charge it again. Eventually, they just tire themselves out, and the only thing they really accomplished was getting worked up for no reason. And this is exactly how John and Mac handled leaving the cash box at the venue.
There's just the three of us in the van, and at one point, somebody realizes that, oh shit, where's the cash box? There's a sudden urgency of, oh shit, If we lose that, we are completely fucked, because anything that's in that thing is keeping gas in the van, and just like we're dead, completely dead in the water if we don't have that thing. So typical me is just like, yep, all right, no big deal, let's go back, and I'm sure it's there.
If we had left a band merch sales box behind with $10,000 in it, we would have felt a hell of a lot better than leaving a band merch box behind with like $300 in it. Because you're like, it's like literally this is all we have, and we can't even give enough of a shit about that. How are we going to get to the next show? We can't afford it. Like it was a very stupid, low moment, enough to like fight each other physically over.
The situation is getting more and more tense with why we don't have it, whose fault it is, why we don't have it, whose fault it is, why we don't have it, whose fault it is.
John and I were unwilling to stand down. The two arguing points are like literally two total imbeciles just like holding a grudge against each other.
Max saw this as a turning point that needed to be recognized by the entire band. Because if they didn't and they let this go, then it was all gone. There are not many hills that Mac would choose to die on, but this one, this was it. This was the one.
I'm driving, Jaws in the back seat. We have to pull over because it's about to become violent while in the car. We got out and had at each other for a little while, verbally, non-physical.
He was upset that I wanted to just take the shot in the nuts and move on and just shut the fuck up about it.
My approach was that we needed to personally acknowledge responsibility at that moment. And John's response was that we needed to be better in the future. It's just basically like we were ready to rip each other's throats out. That was the nuance of the argument.
They were getting crazy. It was so weird.
They found the cash box. It was at the venue, and it was in the exact same spot where they left it. Untouched and ignored. The fight between John and Mac that night was not about the money box. It was a moment that everything since 2001 caught up with them. All the stress about moving west right after 9/11, the stress of those early days in Los Angeles trying to find a drummer to replace Pete, the stress of the early tours, making no money, all of it. Driving at night, staying up late, being drunk, being hungover, never getting a good night's sleep for months and months and months on end with no end in sight. It all caught up to them that night.
After it was over, it was kind of like that thing like where like all the doors in the van close and then we drive silently for a little while and then we're like, man, that was weird.
I do remember the moment afterwards of cracking up in the van where you're like, what the fuck just happened? It's like a fever dream. Where you're like, this is the most ridiculous bullshit that we've wasted our time on today.
Well, I guess it's time to find somebody to play the drums.
They ended up finding somebody to fill in for me for the rest of the tour, and I just couldn't think about it.
John did what he could to find another drummer as quickly as he could. Called some people in Los Angeles. They called some people. Some other people called some people. They got a drummer out there. Pretty good.
The guy that I'm talking to is in a massive band, and he tells me,
hey, I know this guy who plays drums, and he's in Florida, and he's where you guys are going to be in a couple days. Let me call him up.
If his drummer was ever to leave, he's the number one guy he'd call. So I'm like, fuck yeah, man. Let's fucking do this.
And I'm thinking, okay, I hope this goes okay. Anytime before this, if we had ever had jammed with somebody else or whatever, it's just like, what? Like it's almost like we couldn't understand how to play with a different drummer, or maybe nobody understood how to play with us.
Pete's replacement was flown in the following night and made it to the venue just before showtime. Let me reiterate that. Just before showtime.
So anyways, we stop and get this guy, and he's just like, he's kind of, he's older than us. He's just kind of got this big ego, and he's kind of moody. All of a sudden, he was like full blast, sinus infection, and he was sick in the back of the van, and he's mad.
I started having a bad feeling about him. Like, we're not going to have time to rehearse. We had time for him to land, set up his drum kit, and then we had to start playing. For the first time, we didn't have like any rehearsal. We had nothing, and for me, that is a goddamn nightmare.
I'm going to now do my best to impersonate what I assume John's inner monologue might have sounded like moments before he and the band went on stage with this brand new drummer they had literally just met. So, just right up on stage then? Okay, here you go. Here's a fucking stranger ready to maybe play the drums properly. Who the fuck is this dude? What the fuck? What the fuck just happened? Is Pete okay? No, I'm not fucking saying anything tonight. No, I'm not saying shit.
I had to pull Mac aside and say, I'm going to be no good to you tonight. I can sing and I can play the guitar and I can get through this, but I cannot talk. Can you please handle whatever needs to be said between songs? Because I got a bad feeling.
They just sent him a CD and said, here, play this quick in your headphones while you're taking a shower, and then go play a show with these guys. And it didn't go that well.
It was like a horrible environment to have that first show.
This was maybe one of the worst performance moments for me.
Pete does two things better than any other drummer I know, which is play to the tempo always and doesn't do too much.
Within seconds, John knew shit was not going to go well.
We started playing and it was just like, oh God. From second one on song one of us playing it for the first time ever.
The fills were a little bit longer and flashier than any of us were expecting, I think. And the tempos would start to pick up a little bit. In the idiom of our music, right? Something that would have been like da-da-da-da-da was now like da-da-da-da-da-da. It was like the whole feel of it was very like, it didn't have, if our music had some sort of grandeur to it, it was totally gone.
I just remember the blood just pooling in my head during the first song, and then me just turning around between songs. I wouldn't talk to anyone. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't look at the audience, and I fucking chugged beer.
The only thing I do remember about hearing about on that tour was how much Ryan hated that guy.
This is the craziest thing. He and Ryan despised each other. And I think it was partially Ryan's allegiance to Pete.
That dude, he clearly didn't want to be there. I don't know why he even agreed to go. Like I couldn't understand. He would just kind of do whatever he wanted back there. And I don't know, maybe they just made a mistake giving us that guy. Maybe there's other guys that could have listened to it and play it better.
He told me like on multiple occasions how much he hated that guy and how much they butted heads. And, selfishly, I kind of was like, okay, good. Like, fuck that guy, But at the same time, like, I don't know if it was in defense of me or just in the band as a whole without me in it. I don't know.
It was a combination of like he wasn't the right style drummer and he just was a jerk. He's kind of just a grumpy jerk. He's a dick. I have his sleeping bag still to this day.
Once the tour came to an end, Pete's replacement wasted no time starting his journey back home.
He just jumped out and left. I don't think he like turned around and waved or said goodbye or anything. I think he just grabbed his shit and just left. The next day, the three of us started on our way back home, and we just took turns driving, and I feel like we didn't stop. I feel like we were just the three of us rotated through. It was weird being just three of us in the van.
We went home, and then we were like, let's figure out how to get Pete back, because I am not doing that again.
I remember him calling me and being like, we're meeting up. You need to come talk to us and tell us what's going on. He almost sounded pissed.
I know I wasn't nice. I think I was kind of like, you owe us an explanation, and maybe we'll want to play with you again. You know what I mean? Like, really in my head being like, we're tied together. We are tied together on this thing through the end.
I was kind of taken aback by that, but at the same time, I still carried a ton of guilt for leaving. So I was like, I'm seeing this counselor. I'm taking medication. I'm learning how to cope. I'm trying to live in the moment more. That kind of stuff. We talked it over. We started practicing again.
To me, of course Pete's coming back with us because he's Pete. It's not the same without, any of the original members. It just doesn't feel right.
The long winter after Pete's departure and the cash box fight was full of repairs. Pete spent time repairing himself, and the band worked on repairing their relationships with each other. And meanwhile, the label was working on getting the band a spring tour that would have ripple effects and create lifelong friendships that still exist to this day.
We just went right back in and started practicing again. So we just did it. We went and started playing again, and it was just like it was like nothing had ever really changed. In my opinion, we just went right back out and started doing it again.
If Pete left for a third time, he wasn't going to come back into the fold. He didn't have to outright say that either. We all knew it. What we didn't know was that if anyone left the band again, it was all over. And sometimes the quietest ones are those holding up the house of cards. Fuck it. For now, we got ourselves a tour, baby, and it's springtime. Even If It Kills Me is a FANG workshop production. Written and narrated by me, Aaron Joy. Produced by John Lullo and Brendan Walter. Featuring original music by Alex Dezen and original theme song by Matt McGinley.